Adam Lerner, and today we have a very special guest on the line. We have with us a local New York photographer. I don't know if he considers himself a Brooklyn photographer, although a lot of his photography is Brooklyn orientated. He is somebody who not only shoots a lot of film, he shoots a lot of medium format film, and he does his own processing. We have ourselves on the line Barry Yanowitz right here, live in person. Hi, Barry.
Hey, Adam. Hey, everybody.
So a lot of you guys are wondering, who is Barry? Well, Barry is a photographer that I discovered through Flickr. And if any of you guys, or when you guys go and visit Barry's photo stream, number one, clear your schedule, because you're going to probably get lost in it like I do, like I did the very first time, like I do pretty much every time I go into his stream. Because his photos are just incredible. I mean, such incredible vision. I mean, Barry is what I would consider to be a true artist and a street photographer. There's all different kinds of elements of, you know, like the Henry Bresson, like that kind of style where he captures those moments. There's beautiful landscapes, long exposures, really like odes to New York City and different neighborhoods, and huge emphasis on Coney Island, which is like one of my most favorite parts of New York City as well. There's even some of that kind of Vivian Mayer kind of vibe, where just kind of getting right up and close and capturing the moment and not being afraid to just take his camera and just, you know, be right amongst, you know, hundreds of people and just take that decisive moment shot, which all of these different kinds of things, believe it or not, have a very cohesive nature to them. And, you know, most, I would say all of your photos have, you know, a real true depth to them. There's something that I find that, you know, I don't necessarily feel like I want to look at them once. I want to look at them again and again. And in fact, the photo that's right here on the screen here, the Coney Island Birdman, I loved this photo so much that I had to buy a print from Barry, and this is the print that's in my office. So, you know, every time I'm doing videos from my office and you guys see that print on my wall, that is this photo, because this is probably one of my favorite all-time photos ever, and I'm honored to have it hanging on my wall. So, Barry is one of those guys that just kind of inspires me to break out of the box and just, you know, not do conventional things and to take more time. And I'm really honored to have him on the line with us tonight. And I feel like you guys are going to probably be inspired like I am as well. So, Barry, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of about you and how you got your start into photography, and maybe what some of your influences were.
Well, sure. Thank you for that great introduction, by the way.
My pleasure.
I grew up I grew up in Coney Island in Brighton Beach, and that's one of the reasons why I'm so fascinated with photoing it. And that's actually one of the things, I'll talk about that in a little bit. Okay. That's one of the things that got me into photography in the first place. Right. But I'm actually not a full-time photographer. It's something that's a extremely enthusiastic hobby that I have. Love doing it. Every once in a while, you know, I'll sell prints. I'll do that on the side. But it's something that I do more for the love of it. The reason I got into photography in the first place, it was about maybe 10 years or so ago, is when I started really getting serious about wanting to do photography and getting interested in it. And it really started with, there was a book by someone, his name is Charles Denson, and he's not really known as a photographer. He's a Coney Island historian. And he grew up there. He was there in the 60s through some of the most turbulent times there. And one of the things he did is he documented Coney Island through photographs throughout that whole period that he lived there. And he wrote this book called Coney Island Lost and Found, and his photos were in there. And I remember looking at the photos in that book and thinking, well, it'd be fascinating to just document just New York and Brooklyn in general, because there are so many changing things. New York is such a city. New York is such a city that changes rapidly. And I really wanted to, you know, just start documenting the different neighborhoods, what they looked like. And what was really interesting is through that process, you know, you learn a lot about New York. Even though I grew up in Brooklyn all my life, through photographing it, you learn about things that you never really experienced before. And you wind up going to a lot of neighborhoods that it's just the excuse to walk through them, not even necessarily to photograph them.
Right.
It's fascinating. And so that's how I really started getting into photography. And from there, it just kind of moved to, it just snowballed into different areas of photography.
It's interesting because I share the same kind of love of New York and real love of Brooklyn. My parents were born in Brooklyn. Their parents were born in Brooklyn. Coney Island, is near and dear to my heart. I mean, I have photographs of myself as a little kid going, to Coney Island and going on the rides. I mean, that's just what we did as a family, as kids. You need
to put some of those up. I want to see those.
I know. I have to kind of grab those out from storage somewhere, which I really, really, absolutely need to do. And interestingly, I feel a similar type of thing in that as an adult, I have I think I'm relearning, New York and Brooklyn specifically. In a lot of the neighborhoods that, I might have kind of breezed through, in a lot of neighborhoods that have changed so much that like maybe I wouldn't have necessarily wanted to go through 15, 20 years ago that now, are more reasonable to go through. Because like you, I'm a native New Yorker. I was, born in New York and I've been here my whole life and, or New York City for that matter. And, I didn't realize that you were actually from the Coney area. But I can honestly say that I'm fascinated with it. It's such an incredible melting pot. I mean, you walk down that boardwalk and you have every walk of life from like, the snaggletooth locals, and forgive me anybody if I'm offending anybody, but you got some really...
my family are some of those snaggletooth locals.
you got some pretty rough people out there, that are down and out. You got your... your Eastern European immigrants that, probably reminisce about going to the Schwitz or the bathhouses when they were, in their heyday. You got the hipsters that are kind of flocking there now. You got, families from all over the place going there. So it's an incredible place because it kind of welcomes everybody. It's like if you want to see a cross section of New York City, all you got to do is go to Coney Island and you'll see that. And, the fact that those structures, still exist, it really kind of brings, a sense of constancy to that place. Even though it's changed and it's tumultuous with change, there is some constancy left. I guess the sea also has that effect as well.
Yeah, it's the funny thing about Coney Island is when I started out, I was really starting out, like I said, to document things. I didn't have any people in my photos at all at first.
Right.
And now... the great thing about Coney Island to me is all the interesting people and the street photography.
Right.
And that's the one thing about Coney Island is no matter what kind of photography you do, there's something fascinating there.
Yeah.
Whether you like night stuff, urban landscapes, street photography, it's kind of, you can't go wrong by going shooting there.
Right. And I feel like you have built and are continuing to build an incredible volume of really compelling street photography, and that what you always seem to manage to do, or very often seem to manage to do, is to take a really interesting scene and incorporate a person into it. Or you're seeing the scene with that person or that solitary image or those two people. You sit there and you wait for that moment, or you just find that moment. I find that to be really super compelling because oftentimes the scenery or the cityscape, whatever it is, as compelling as it may be, when you put the person in the context of that, it instantly becomes more interesting because now you're curious about that person, what they're doing, what they're thinking. You're thinking about you. You're putting yourself in their shoes. It's a very kind of introspective way of kind of showing the city, through the people that you're photographing, even though they're pretty much unaware that you're doing so. And I wonder how that speaks to you as a photographer, how you feel about putting these kind of characters, so to speak, in your frames.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because the reason I started doing street photography that way, and you first started by saying how there's an emphasis of there's an interesting scene and then some character is wandering into the scene. And the reason I started doing that is when I first started getting interested in street photography, I had no idea how to approach shooting just people in general. Like randomly walking up to somebody and shooting them was the most intimidating thing in the world. And I just had no idea. How do you approach that?
Right.
And to get around that weakness, one of the things that, and I still do it, is I tend to stake out an interesting scene first, find something that has a lot of potential, you know, make sure it has the right lighting, interesting background, interesting structure, geometry, whatever.
Right.
But then I will actually kind of wait. I'll hang around there for a while, right? I'll wait for interesting people to come, and that way it's less intimidating because people are kind of coming into your space instead of you invading their space.
Yep.
And you know, I also practice trying to take street photography that's more about just the people and not the scenery around it too.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not quite very good at that yet, but every once in a while I'll get a shot like that. But
I think
the stepping stone for me was starting with the area and then having people walk into it.
Right. And I think that that's really interesting because you know, fortunately you have the patience to do that. And I think that it really takes a lot of patience and a lot of discipline to be able to not only, you know, be versed in your craft well enough to understand that, you know, if you're going to be staking out a particular location, that the light's going to change, that your environment is going to change, so you're going to have to roll with that. But also having the patience to say, you know what, this shot is important enough to me that I'm going to wait to stage this shot. And it shows in your images. I mean, even though there's a nice kind of a candid nature to them where they're not set up in any kind of a way, you can tell that those moments are often very, very precise. And, you know, it's one of those things that just kind of brings a smile to your face because you know, as somebody who's appreciating it, you look at it and you're like, yep, that's just great. I mean, it just works. I mean, you know, let's just start with this Birdman photo. I mean, you know,
Okay.
you've got this dark, black, you know, figure, this guy in this black suit, you know, standing against the shore in Coney Island. And you've got these birds that are perfectly encapsulating him, so much so that there's really no bird over him. I mean, it's just the composition on this is just, you know, maybe, you know, part luck and just all part awesome. Was this the frame or were there other frames, and how did this come about? Because you're awfully close if you're shooting with a medium format camera on this, Rolleiflex, right?
Yeah, it's actually a funny story because that was, I think I had just had the Rolleiflex for a few months at that point, and I was at Coney Island hanging around the beach. It's a few days, it was around Christmas Day. I think it was either a few days before or after. And I saw this guy feeding the birds for distance, and I practically just ran right over there because it looked like the coolest scene in the world.
Right.
And as you said, he was wearing this like black suit almost with a hat. And I was from the side. I didn't even think about taking pictures with my Rolly cord yet, with my film camera yet.
Right.
Because I was still kind of intimidated by using that. I was still learning, so I wanted to just get the shot. And so I took out my digital SLR and I was shooting him. I think, Adam, I might have 500 shots from the side and a couple from the back with my digital SLR. And I got some good ones there, but none of them were the shot. And I figured, you know what, I probably, in one of those 500 images, I probably got one that's pretty good. I said, let me just take one with the Rolly. And I was behind him at that point, and I was watching. And because it's film, there's only 12 exposures on a medium format roll. You know, you wanna make it worthwhile. So you wait till you got the right shot. And I think I took just 2 shots of off the film, and that was the first one that I had shot. And I think when I clicked the shutter, I think I realized, wow, that might have been pretty good. But I wasn't sure until I got home.
I mean, you know, the fact that his arms, you know, up, the birds are flying around the top. I mean, it's just, to me, it's brilliant. I mean, it's one of my favorite photos.
Thank you.
Of not even just yours, it's just one of my absolute very favorite photos that, you know, again, I kind of never get tired of looking at.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And what's interesting is it says something about film and digital. And I'm not one of these people that believes one is better than the other. I kind of look at it as they're just different mediums. And to me, I've learned a lot by shooting film because you have a very different process. Mm-hmm. And there are some situations where I think digital is better. I'm going to get a better shot with digital. Right. There are other situations where I think I'm going to get a better shot with film. And I think after I developed that one and I saw it, that's when I sort of realized that. And that's when I realized that it's not, I stopped looking at it as a handicap or a limitation. It's just another way to approach it. And there are times when that's going to be an advantage to you.
Well, you know, that's definitely the point. And I think in this case, particularly because it was what looks to be an overcast day, because the sea was calm, because the beach was very flat. You've got all these beautiful silvery muted tones. So the forms of the seagulls and the guy feeding them, and like that little bit of, wake, crashing, it just makes the image three-dimensional. So really nicely done. Why don't you, speaking of film, I know that a lot of the folks that, follow this channel are curious about film, or maybe just new to getting into film. They know that I love shooting film. I shoot a variety of different formats. I'm actually I love doing Polaroid. I have my Rolleiflex. I have a bunch of different film cameras. Why don't you just give us an idea, what got you into doing film, and then take it one step further and tell us a little bit about how you are doing your own self-developing. You're doing the processing actually in your apartment.
Yeah, definitely. So I think the reason I didn't start shooting film sooner than I have is because I didn't think it was even possible to develop it in an apartment like this without setting up a complicated darkroom.
Right.
I always thought you'd have to either be taping up all your windows in your apartment or sending it out to a lab. And that was sort of a barrier for me for a while. And there's someone that we both know on Flickr, Claire, and you could probably maybe put a link up to our website that shows you how to develop film.
Right.
She had this great tutorial that showed you actually how to develop black and white film. And the cool thing about it was you really don't need a dark room at all. And I have some of the stuff here.
Oh, nice.
With me. And basically, I went and bought this development tank, and this is where you put the film in.
Right.
And when you open it up, basically it just has a couple of reels, and you get the film on these reels, and these are adjustable, so you could do it for 35 millimeter.
Right.
Or they adjust. You can get them wider for 120 film, medium format. And the question is, well, how do you get them on these reels without exposing the film? You could just get something called a changing bag, and it's basically a little black bag, has a zipper on one end, and it kind of looks like, I don't know if my webcam has a wide enough angle to show the whole thing, but it kind of looks like a shirt without the neck.
Yep.
And basically, you just, each one of these little sleeves, you put your hand in, and you wind the film in the bag like that. And
right.
That way, you don't have to expose the film. You don't need a dark room. You don't need to tape up all your windows. And you just need some of those basic supplies, and then some of the chemicals, which are also pretty cheap. And the black and white chemicals are apparently a lot safer than the color ones. So
right.
There's nothing really dangerous in your house if you're doing black and white developing.
Well, so when you're putting the film in the changing bag, are you doing that in a dark space to begin with? So you just take the roll, you dump it in there, you put your hands in there, you peel it apart, and you put it on the little spindle thing. So you basically put all the stuff in there.
Yeah, there's a pretty cool video on YouTube. If you go to Claire's site where she shows you how to develop it,
right.
She links to someone's YouTube video where they actually show you how to thread it.
Right.
And what you do is you basically get like a sacrifice roll of film where
right.
practice in the light.
Of course.
Take pictures on it.
Right.
And you practice with that a few times and you get comfortable with it. And then you do it blind.
Right.
And the bag is light safe, so anything
right.
anything you have, any film you have out in there is safe. It's not going to get exposed.
Yeah, when I was in college, I had I did black and white, and I would, from B&H, I would buy the Tri-X in 100-foot bulk, and then I would buy the little empty canisters, and I had a little canister pressing machine, and I would basically in the changing bag, I would just go 1, 2, 3. I don't remember how many lengths it was. I think it was 3 kind of spread arm lengths was approximately 36 exposures or so. And then I would kind of thread it on there. There was a little film winder thing that I would do. And then I would just, make my own little rolls of film. And it was a much less expensive way, because back in college, you're just shooting like crazy. I mean, you're just, every week you're doing tons of rolls. Yeah. So I remember it well, and sitting there and doing the agitating and all that kind of stuff. And back then, fortunately, I had access to dark rooms and whatnot. And there's plenty of dark rooms that are here around the city, but that's if you obviously want to take it even further and you want to do your own printing. But obviously, like you're saying, with relative ease and some practice, you can do your own film processing. And how long would you say the process takes from when you load all the goodies into the bag till when you actually have the negatives drying in your shower?
Yeah, it's about 45 minutes. It's not too long. And then it takes, I'd say between 2 and 3 hours to dry, sometimes sooner than that. And then you scan them and you have the negatives. So the cool thing about the process, especially the first time you do it, but even every time you do it, it never gets old. Once you're finished pouring the chemicals in and all that's done, like it's about 45 minutes after the fact, after you first started, take the film out and you get to see it. And you somehow, with pouring chemicals in and out and shaking it, somehow there's actual like negatives and photos on those negatives. It's like an amazing process. It just seems so bizarre.
It's very
and
tactile.
You take it out and you see them for the first time is like the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, that's great. And I definitely give you kudos for doing your own processing. I mean, it kind of makes me feel like, why am I such a lazy man these days? But
give it a try. It's fun. It's actually, I enjoy it. The part I enjoy the least is probably the scanning, just because you got to wait for the scanner and you're trying to line everything up. The developing part I love. That's like my favorite part. It's relaxing, actually.
Well, it seems like you've got a really nice technique with that. And right now, I've actually switched over to the Verrazano in the sun shot. And this shot, I believe, was done with a Brownie camera. Yes.
So I'll actually show you that.
Okay. So this is a very high-tech, sophisticated camera.
With lots of sophisticated settings. In fact, there's no settings on it. There's a shutter.
Right.
And when I first got it, I was trying to figure out, well, there's a shutter, but there's no, you can't set the shutter speed, the aperture. And I was trying to figure out, well, what is the natural shutter speed or aperture? And if you go to 10 different websites, they all give you different answers. And it turns out the shutter could be 1/30th of a second or 1/60th of a second. And the point is, it doesn't really matter. It's a point-and-shoot camera, and the charm of it is it's solely composition. That's the only thing you worry about. You think about composition, nothing else. Oh, the one setting I lied. There's one setting when you pull this little switch up, then you have bulb, so you can hold the shutter down and do a long exposure.
Long exposure, gotcha.
But that's it. No more settings.
Okay.
And that Verrazano in the sun picture just happened to have. The shot of the Verrazano, I was looking at it, and a couple of people started walking down the path.
Right.
And I managed to, just get the shot off. And
you see, that's what's so brilliant to me about this shot is that you've got, this kind of relatively darker area on the left side of the frame, but then on the right-hand side, you've got the sun, which you're shooting into, which is reflecting off of the Hudson River. And then you've got these two forms that are kind of like briskly walking along, and the bridge kind of framing up I mean, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous shot, and it's just got that beautiful muted look. It's got a nice grain to it. I like the way the light's even catching, the street lamp over here, and even that little bit of the BQE or Belt Parkway over there. I mean, it's a beautiful shot.
Thank you.
I mean, honestly, like 1 millisecond later, and one of those people would have been kind of incorporated into that tree, and the shot wouldn't have been even nearly as compelling. So for this particular shot, was this handheld, or did you put this on something? What's the process when you're shooting the Brownie?
This particular one was handheld.
It looks like winter.
What's that?
It looks like winter.
It was a pretty freezing day. I was actually there with a couple of friends who I met on Flickr.
Right.
And we were all shooting there, and it was freezing that day. It was one of the coldest days of the year up to that point.
Wow.
And the thing about the Brownie, too, is that you don't worry about under or overexposure. I use a film like Tri-X in it, which is it's black and white film. It's very forgiving. So if you underexpose, it's very easy to kind of, still get details out of the picture.
Sure.
Or if you overexpose, you still don't lose too many details in the bright. So it's a nice film to shoot in the Brownie. And the thing about the Brownie too is it's the look and feel. Usually, I see different Brownies. I see different characteristics sometimes too. But they usually have that very dreamlike look. It's very hazy. Part of that is the lens is plastic,
right?
which
tiny,
which contributes to the look. Yeah, so it's this is something where the idea is to take advantage of the cameras. This is what it is.
It's got inherent limitations.
Yeah.
And and you can't expect it to do anything more than it's capable of.
Yeah.
But what I love about it is that you have taken your signature style of incorporating, an ode to New York City and just placed two forms perfectly right there against, silhouetted against the reflection of the water. I mean, it's just, again, it's one of those shots that, I'm just like, man, that is just awesome. It's dreamy. I love the ethereal look about it. It's one of my, again, it's another one of my favorite shots. Just a really beautiful shot. And it's just one of those views that you don't normally see of the Verrazano Narrows Bridge. So very, very well done on that. Let me bring up another shot over here. I'm just going to rifle through a couple of these. Okay, so this shot up here that I have now is called Revolver. And I believe this was shot with your 7D.
Yes.
And it has that filmy look to it. And the thing that makes this shot work is these three figures that are just kind of all opposed to each other with the caution tape, stringing them together. I mean, it's just one of those things where your mind just keeps going around and around and around looking at it. So not only do you have a revolving door here, but you've also, the way you frame this, you've created an image that your eyes are constantly revolving around, which is just insane. And the fact that she's making eye contact to some degree, or at least she's looking, and that's her reflection in the glass, kind of locks you back in. So you keep doing this loop, and then you're ending up back at her. It's just another one of those really well-seen images. I know that you love shooting with a lot of reflections and kind of juxtaposing, people and things in those images. And it's just wondering kind of what prompted that with you?
Well, I'll start with this particular photo. This photo was sheer luck.
Great.
I wish I could take credit for composing that and making it look the way it did. But what was really going on was I was using my 10 to 22 lens, which very wide angle. I think I shot that at 10 millimeters.
Right.
And I think there was some kind of on the window on the second floor, the first floor, they were trying to either load something from the ground to the window or vice versa.
Right.
And I was trying to shoot that. And I was kind of shooting that scene. And when I got home, I realized that they had the woman's reflection in the revolving door and the two guys with hats kind of looking at each other and looking at her. I didn't even know I got that until I got home and I saw it.
Yep.
So that was just dumb luck. I wish I could take more credit for that one.
And sometimes that's just what kind of happens. I have found that there are times when, my mind is focused on one thing, but then the resultant image is even better than I could have imagined. And I think that, when you shoot enough, that kind of thing, you do have happy accidents. And to me, this is one of those. So let me just try to move on to another shot here. Let's go back. Let's go over to the bus stop shot.
Which one is that?
This is the one where it's a marquee, I guess, Tom Hanks and Sandra Bullock. Oh. There's an older woman and there's a couple of women sitting in the bus stop. There's a little kid looking at his reflection with his dad walking with him. I mean, it's just one of these, again, visually just a lot to soak in. And I think this was with the Rolly.
Yeah, that was with the Rolly cord. And the reason I like the Rolly cord is I think one of the reasons I started looking at other cameras aside from the digital SLR is when I'm shooting those kind of photos with my digital SLR, people react differently to me. They tend to step out of the way. So rather than just walking right by, they say, oh, he's using very complicated professional equipment. He must be doing something very serious. So they get out of my way. And in my head, I'm like, no, don't get out of the way. I want you to walk through the scene. But with something like the Rolly cord, I mean, I was basically standing in that spot. And this is another example of patience, really. The week before, I was walking around Chinatown taking photos, and I had seen that spot. And the Tom Hanks movie, Incredibly Loud, Incredibly Clear, something like that.
Right.
Whatever it is. That was one of the posters that was rotating. So every third time it rotated, it was hitting that one. Right. And it was really interesting.
So you've got the kid's face on the poster.
Yeah.
And you've got, what's interesting is you've got these two women that are looking toward the camera because they're obviously waiting for the bus. You've got the kid looking at his reflection. So you've got the kid's reflection twice. You've also got the dad walking the kid, which if you really have to look into that third layer over there. So you've got, 4 different layers of folks over. I mean, it's just, again, it's one of those like just freaking awesome. I mean, you took the time and you're nailing these exposures. I mean, granted, you might have, done a little bit of stuff in post, whatever, that's your, who knows? But it, it looks like a really solid exposure too. And, when you're shooting with a rolly cord, there's not a lot of settings on that either.
Yeah. Well, no, you have full control over, the aperture, the shutter speed. It's manual. Right. But you can control.
Is the aperture and the shutter speed independent on that? You have independent controls for both?
You do. The only thing is that when you change the shutter speed, it changes the aperture also. So
right. That's like mine.
But you can do them separately. It's just it tries to keep the exposure when you change the shutter.
So it wants to choose for you.
Yeah, which is that's the Rolleiflexes I think don't do that though, right?
No.
Or do they?
I think the Rolleiflex, it doesn't give you the option to override.
Oh, I see.
Well,
this one you can override. You could just hold one down and move the other one, or when you move the aperture, it does not move the shutter. So, but for that one, the boy looking into the bus stop reflection. I had taken a shot there the week before. It was a really interesting scene. Just for whatever reason, I just wasn't getting the right person there. The lighting wasn't so good. And I was looking at it and I said, this is interesting. This has potential. So I finally got a chance to get back there the next week. And first thing, when I was walking over the Manhattan Bridge to that spot, I was praying that they didn't change the ad. I was like, well, God, they don't take that poster down. But luckily, the poster was still there. And I think I took about a roll and a half of medium format film on it.
And that's the thing. I mean, in a situation like this, sometimes you really do need to take a handful of shots to get the one, because all of us know when you don't have the one, you don't have the one. Particularly when you've spent the time that you've spent pre-visualizing it. And the one other component to this too that nails it is the little canyon of light in the center between the bus stop and the buildings. You got a guy standing there on the phone. So it's just like, there is really, there's no dead space on here. So this is, again, another one of those, awesome shots. So let me grab something else over here. I'm going to grab your I Love New York shot. Now, for what it's worth, this was my wallpaper on my screen for a very long time.
Cool.
It's gorgeous. And, the thick black tones, like incredible contrast. The water is just completely creamy and calm. I mean, you definitely scored on a great night, because you've got even the reflection of these piers. And this was shot probably, I'm guessing, with your 7D?
Yeah, the 7D, and I think that was also the 10-22 lens.
Right. And did you correct for distortion in this, or is that just kind of how it came out of the camera?
I don't remember. I don't even remember if it was closer to the 10 end or the 22 end. But it was. I might have corrected for distortion a little bit if it was at the 10 end. I think it was. Closer to the 22 end.
Right. So this was a long exposure shot, which you have a lot of, and you seem to have a real kind of grasp on that. And what prompted you to do this shot, and what did you go into as far as preparing for this shot? Because I know that there's a lot of folks out there that do long exposures and or are looking to do long exposures, and it'd be good to kind of have some things to think about when they're thinking about doing this kind of thing.
Sure. So the reason I took that shot in the first place is Brooklyn Bridge Park. That's where I took that. It's you can tell what it's looking at, right? It's looking at the greatest skyline in the world, right? Where you have this amazing view of Manhattan. And that section of the park that I took that in wasn't opened when they when they first opened the park. The first section, you were able to see those piers, but you couldn't get to the spot that I took that from. And I remember thinking back, you know, is there a way to sneak into that section and take that photo? Because I can imagine, I kind of saw it already that was going to be pretty interesting.
Right.
And I think that the night after, the second night that they opened that section, I went down there, and that's when I shot that. And to do long exposures, you know, typically, the good thing about long exposures is I find that, you know, you don't have to get the exposure perfect. You know, if you're 20 seconds or 30 seconds, you're not going to see a huge difference usually. There's some shots that you will, but something like that, I find that it's, you know, you're pretty much, you're shooting with the stuff that's lit. And that little area was lit pretty well because they had these overhead floodlights that kind of hit the piers. And a lot of people have asked me if I used a flash on that, but that wasn't a flash. That was actually these floodlights that light that area. So the people who designed the park, I'm convinced, like a photographer designed it because they almost made it perfect for for a photographer to go there and take that shot. And you know, I usually, you know, I'll meter it first. I usually shoot those kind of scenes manual on a digital SLR. You know, I try to shoot them pretty high depth of field, so I have, you know, get everything in focus.
Right.
And you know, it's the good thing about digital in that case is you can try a number of different shots.
Sure.
And get it. But
and you can see the results right away.
Yeah.
When you say you meter, are you metering with the camera? Is that what you mean?
Yep. Yeah, I meter with the camera.
Well, what I love
sometimes I meter by doing a test shot.
Of course, yeah. No, we all do that. I mean, that's you know, it's perfectly natural to do that because, look, sometimes you nail it right out of the gate. You go in there and you say, you know what, I'm going to be at, you know, f16 for 90 seconds, ISO 100, blah blah blah. You have like all this kind of mental note. You put the thing on the tripod, you do the exposure, and you're like, wow, that probably is it. But you're going to do a handful more just to make sure. But this one, I love the framing on this one. I love the way you really got this, the pylons, or the what are they called again? Piers, you know, kind of lined up really, really nicely in this center bit. So you've got like that nice kind of vanishing point action going on there. And as soon as the vanishing point kind of comes to its smallest point, it explodes back into the city. So you've got like beautiful light in the front, beautiful light up there. The sky's illuminated. And that's the other thing is that, you know, shooting cityscapes, the sky is really, really integral to the shot, because if the sky was just black, it wouldn't be as compelling. It certainly would be a beautiful shot, but you wouldn't have the silvery tone of the sky matching the silvery tone of the water. So, you know, it really has a beautiful balance to it. And again, it's just, you know, it's just really well seen, and another one of my favorites.
Thanks. Yeah, when I saw that one, I thought those posts really echoed the skyscrapers in the background, and
that too, absolutely,
kind of irresistible to shoot it. And the cool thing about it too is a lot of friends of mine have actually gone and shot at people I know from Flickr and other photographers. Sure. And the cool thing about it is they placed their camera in about the same spot, but each photo looked so unique and so different.
Definitely.
And that's what I thought that was pretty cool. And I always am amazed by that with photography. When I go out shooting with other people, you know, we could all be shooting the same thing, and every photo tends to have its own unique look, and I love that. You
give 10 people, you know, a camera to shoot the same thing, and you're going to get 10 variations of that image, which is really what makes us all unique. So this one, this is terrific. So right now I'm at Puddles Tell the Story. You tend to, you know, this is another one of those, you know, shots with reflections and timing, and, you know, epic, you know, New York City scenery. The thing that I love about this shot is, you know, the sparsity of this one, in that, you know, other than this solitary runner, it's probably, you know, an early time of day perhaps, or something where there's not a lot of people around. And you're looking at the Manhattan Bridge and you're like missing the rest of it, but then you see it in the puddle. And you see the runner in the puddle. So, you know, the story is completed in the foreground, which is really very cool. Obviously, Dumbo is a very picturesque place to be shooting. And you know, I don't know if you waited for this one, or if this guy just happened to run along. But, it's another one of those timing shots.
Yeah, I was taking a bunch of shots in this. This one also took with the rolly cord. And I was taking a bunch of shots in the spot. And this actually is a pretty famous shot for photography.
Yeah.
Whenever someone's in Dumbo, it's kind of mandatory. You have to shoot the street.
Right.
You can't see it in my photo, although I've taken many photos like it. If you line it up right, in that arch, you can actually see the Empire State Building.
Oh, wow.
If you, angle it the correct way. But in this case, I was more interested in playing with that puddle. And, that's actually one of the things I'm obsessed with, all kinds of reflections.
Yes.
I'm always, my friends laugh at me when I'm kind of walking, in the street. They see me looking at a puddle and they know exactly what's going through my head.
Yep.
And so I like the idea that you can kind of see the bridge partially in the background, but then the rest of it's visible in the puddle. And I like that distortion that the puddle gave it. And this is another example where I was kind of shooting around there for a while.
Right.
And, there are other shots where people were walking by, but nothing was really resonating with me. But when the guy ran by and even you can get a little bit of him in the puddle there, that was, I think that shot I knew I
that
moved on.
That's what makes the shot, that movement, that stretches your eye across the frame, across the puddle. A lot of your images, to me, tell a few different stories, and this is a perfect example of that. So I know I've done this shot before, and this is just, I really like the way you've done it. And the thing that's nice about black and white too is that it just leaves a little bit more for the imagination. I know you do shoot a lot in color as well, but this obviously really works. So let me just bring up. I'm just kind of randomly just bringing stuff up along as we're chatting. So I have here Coney Island lights. This is the shot of, I guess, the Wonder Wheel spinning and some other ride kind of forming what looks to be, just a beautiful array of color, of light and darkness, and so crisp. And this is another one of your rolly cord shots.
This was, I had the rolly cord for about, I think a little over a year at that point. And I had shot it at night in Coney Island. I'd shot it during the daytime, but I was starting to do more long exposures with film. And, I wanted to capture Coney Island at night on Tri-X film, and black and white Tri-X film, because it has just a little bit of amount of grain there.
Yep.
And the tones that you get from Tri-X are so nice. So I was shooting the Wonder Wheel, and one of the things, I shot the Wonder Wheel at night many times on digital, and one of the things that I noticed is the pattern where it spins around. What happens is it stops every 30 seconds or so for people to get on and off. And then it maybe does one or two complete spins. And if you don't do a really long exposure, you don't get that full fill-in of the pattern there. So you kind of have all those circles within circles there. Those are the lights from the Wonder Wheel. And when it spins around, when you do a shorter exposure, you get some really interesting patterns.
Right.
But if you do, I've never been able to do a long enough exposure without overexposing it, where you get the whole Wonder Wheel there. And the way I was able to do it on film is, when you do night shots with film, it depends on the film you use, but on Tri-X, you have to compensate, because if your exposure is naturally going to be 30 seconds, film doesn't expose evenly across that 30 seconds. So the first second or the last second doesn't get exposed as the first second. So there's a chart that you can download from Kodak's website, and it says if your exposure is 30 seconds, then with Tri-X compensate, it should be 2 minutes, let's say. And so you're able to get this really 2 minute long exposure, and you get that full revolution of the Wonder Wheel. So you get all those lights kind of filling in all those gaps there in that weird pattern. And that's what I was really interested in.
Well, that's what I love about it. I love the way it looks kind of like a spoked wheel, because most of the time when you see a Wonder Wheel night exposure, it's just all continuous rings of light. So to me, this is iconic. I mean, it just kind of resonates. And the fact that the street light breaks up the black space coincidentally, and then you've got this chaotic array of these, kind of lines going, squiggling all across. I mean, it's just lovely, and the fact that it says Wonder Wheel kind of ties it all together. I love the black space, you know, along the top. I mean, the framing is just awesome. And of
Thanks.
course,
To me, Coney Island at night is all about motion. You know, you have all kinds of rides. They're spinning and twirling, and you know, there are so many cool opportunities to get long exposures there.
Well, you know, the thing is that what's really interesting is that you gravitate so heavily toward this analog vibe, but you support it with all of the digital reference. And that's a very interesting thing because, you know, you obviously embrace the old way, the old school, the look and the feel of the analog and the film and the cameras that you're using, but you're very effective apparently at using the internet to find the answers to what you need, as far as, like you said, going to the Kodak's website and understanding, like, if you're going to do this kind of this kind of exposure, that you need to do this. If you want to figure out how to develop, if you want to, all these different things out there. And it's interesting because oftentimes I get emailed, you know, from subscribers saying, like, well, how do I do this? And how do I do that? And how do I do this? And I just think, like, man, if you don't know how to use the internet to your ability right now, you're missing a huge opportunity. I mean, granted, sure, it's nice to be told how to do something, but when you start doing the research, you uncover such a wealth of information. And I can really see that, you know, in the technical aspects of your images. I mean, you approach the technical aspect of it flawlessly, or not flawlessly. I mean, I don't want to give you that much credit. no, but you approach it in such a way that you make it look easy. But I'm sure that there's been a ton of trial and error, and that you've done your research, that you're not showing up to do this shot and just saying, like, you know what, I'll try this exposure and that exposure, and I'll just look at the film and I'll write down my settings maybe. It sounds to me like you're actually, like your other shots, you know, where you've seen a place that you wanted to photograph, you've come back at the right time. It sounds to me like you're doing a pretty high level of preparedness before you're going into these shoots.
Sometimes I do a level of preparedness beforehand. Sometimes I failed miserably beforehand that I had to find out why.
And that's the beautiful thing, that you know, obviously when you've made those mistakes, I'm assuming that, you know, you've gone and figured out why and then gone back to correct them.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel the same way. I mean, I feel like, you know, I'm always analyzing my photography and looking at ways that I can improve it. If I did something that I wasn't happy with, you know, even if I got kind of the desired results, but I didn't like the way I did it, I'm always like in that pursuit of, you know, how can I improve? Are there other ways out there? Is there other methodology? So that's really interesting that, you know, that tidbit you told me about the Kodak website is really, really quite cool.
Yeah, what I do is I think on my iPhone now I have 4 or 5 of those different ones for different kinds of films, and it's just a little PDF file that gives you like the chart of how to compensate. So, right. You know, I have them on there now.
Yeah, I'm at another Wonder Wheel shot where you have, what is this? The Thunderbolt and the Wonder Wheel. And the Wonder Wheel here is this was potentially, I'm guessing, maybe a longer exposure. It's called Coney Island Lights. Same type of thing, perhaps even the same night. Hard to say.
Yeah, that was the same night.
And you know, the thing that's really cool about this is that this is timeless. You know, other than maybe, you know, if you look at the lights that are pointed up at the Wonder Wheel and you think, okay, those might have been made in the 70s. It really doesn't. There's nothing that would indicate that the time has changed in this location. This one is, you know, obviously more absent of people and things. But it really has that timeless look with the lights and the Thunderbolt and all that kind of stuff. Very cool.
Thanks. Yeah, Coney Island is, you know, it's a timeless place, right? The Wonder Wheel, I don't know how long it's been around. But it's been around for many, many years. It's one of the oldest rides there. And, you know, you kind of feel the history when you're there. One thing that's interesting about this shot from the last shot.
Right.
The 2 sides of the Wonder Wheel are lit differently.
Yes.
The side that you're looking at in Coney Island Lights, that's the modern side. I don't know what year those lights went on.
I see.
The other side, where the other photo was taken,
right?
They recently went back and they actually put like the classic lights that were originally on the Wonder Wheel on that side. And that's why the patterns look very different from shot to shot.
Yeah. Well, it's great, and I love the way that the entire frame is consumed by all of these structures and lights, and it's just again another one of those like kind of visually dazzling images. And this one, is more silvery in its tones, in its tonality. It's still thick. It still has like plenty of contrast and plenty of blacks, but it's just got a little bit of a more of a silvery vibe to it. So I really like that a lot. I'm just trying to think of some other ones that I can pull up here while we're chatting. And I'm just going to look at what we've covered over here. So let's just give people a couple of different ways that they can reach you. Number one, everybody who's watching this has to, check out your Flickr stream. Add Barry as a contact. You want to get lost in his photos. I'm going to put those links up there. I'm going to make sure that you guys have those links to add Barry as a friend. Barry is probably one of the nicest guys on Flickr too, because not only does he have like admirers from all over the planet, he actually interacts with them all. So don't be surprised if he starts following your Flickr stream as well. I know that Twitter is another way that you post, and that's how a lot of us get up to the date images as well. You've also got a website, Barry Y Photos, and there I guess you've got a lot of galleries and
prints are available.
Oh, prints are available to purchase over here. Okay, this is great. So if any of you guys were thinking about purchasing any of these prints, which I would strongly suggest that you do, I know that when I purchased that print from you, it just came like that. So it was kind of like a flawless process, and you probably undercharged me by way too much. So I hope you've raised your prices since then.
Yes.
But obviously, you can deal with Barry directly for that kind of stuff. Do you shoot every day?
I try to, but I do not.
Right.
I try to get out there and shoot as much as possible. There are some days that I don't.
Sure.
But it's definitely it's an ambition, but it doesn't realistically happen, unfortunately.
While we're talking, I'm letting the slideshow on your site play, and it's fantastic because it's really going through some of my favorite images. I love the fishing guy with the golden sun and the Statue of Liberty. Then followed by the paddle surfing guy. There's tons more of your night stuff. A lot of the kind of urban isolation, if you want to call it that. And I don't feel a loneliness from the urban isolation. I just feel like you're kind of just taking it's more serenity that I feel when I see your images. I don't feel like it's a dark kind of isolation. It's more like just saying like, I found a quiet spot in New York, folks, and look, there's somebody in it too. And that's it. It's just us right now.
Yeah, there are some times when I go for the more darker part of it. There are other times when it's more light.
Sure.
And sometimes a lot of times I will try to make a photo that has a certain feel, a certain tone to it. And when I either develop it or get home and look at it, it's completely different. But that's part of photography. That's one of the nice surprises, actually. And a lot of times the thing you think you were trying to get isn't as good as the thing you actually got.
Right. Well, the thing that's really awesome about the margarita shot's hilarious. The thing that's awesome about your stuff here is that you're doing it for you. Obviously, you've got a Flickr following now, so you can't let us down because, we're always dying to see whatever you're going to be putting out there. And I'm sure that the sense of community that you've developed, probably encourages you to further your craft. But the thing that I want you to impart to everybody that's watching this is it doesn't matter what gear you have. Whether you're shooting with, what is seemingly a cheap plastic brownie one-hit wonder camera, all the way up to a Rolly cord, and even beyond it to a Leica M9, which I know that you have.
Yep.
I could probably put any camera in your hand right now, from like the cheapest camera to the most expensive camera. I could probably put a Hasselblad in your hand, or an Argus or whatever, and I'm certain that if I just unleashed you for a couple hours, you would come back with brilliant photos, because it's how you're seeing things. And I think that I would love for you to expand on that, because I get questions all the time. Should I buy this lens? Should I buy this body? Should I buy this? Should I buy that? It's like everybody is so gear obsessed. And I want to hear what you would have to say to that, if you want to expand on that.
The way I always approach that is I look at whatever gear I have, I look at that as a challenge. And so how could I make compelling pictures with this particular camera? And part of that is learning what the limitations are of it, learning what the strengths are. And a lot of times what you think are limitations, the more you look at it, you realize that there are strengths also, strengths that other cameras might not have. And so I think the most important thing is you should know your gear, right? You should know how to make the most of it, know how to use it. But the most important part is just figuring out, how do I get compelling shots out of this? And for instance, with the Brownie, there are some shots that if I tried to get those kinds of photos with it, it wouldn't be that good. So it's more about choosing the kind of style of photography that fits that camera and fits your own style.
Yep.
It's getting that whatever, however those two intersect.
So let me ask you something
that's
here.
What I find interesting.
If one of our subscribers here, one of the readers here was to say to you, hey, Barry, you know, I've got a 50 millimeter 1.8, but I'm thinking about getting an 18 to 200, blah, 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 and they're very new to photography, what would you tell them?
I think the first thing I would do is I would ask, what is it about the 18 to 20 that you want? But then the second thing I would probably say is, you know, learn a little bit about the 1.8 first.
Yes.
Spend time with it. And then you might decide that maybe the 1.8 is not something that fits your style, but you might decide that the 18 to 20 isn't, the 18 to whatever isn't either. Right. So the idea is try to make the most of that gear that you have. You're going to learn so much more about your photography and your style. And then from there you can kind of branch out. But start small. Don't focus on 100 different lenses. I would say focus on one lens, learn it really well, and you can go from there. You know.
Yep, and I think that's really the key. You know, I'm just looking at the square format film version of the Tribute to Lights shot at the pier. That is gorgeous. The color on that is just stunning on that one. You know, look, I think those are incredible words to live by, because I think that people feel that if they buy gear, the gear will make them a better photographer. Now, granted, like you said, and like I'll agree, certain cameras have inherent limitations that will possibly prevent you from taking things to a certain level. So, however, it doesn't mean that just buying equipment is going to make you a better photographer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's what, you know, really compels me to look at your work, is that, you know, you are working with relatively straightforward gear, you know, and it's just about seeing, and it's about the patience to find that kind of, you know, find what you're looking for. It's about the perseverance to really seek it out and not say, yeah, you know, that looks cool, but I don't know. To say, you know what, I am going to go back there and I'm going to get that shot. And it's practicing your craft, just like you said, taking that dummy roll of film and practicing loading it in and out of the developer can enough times so that when you finally put it in the bag, you pretty much know your way around it, so that you're not, you know, wasting time with it. Practicing your craft, you know, and ultimately also I think it's about your point of view. I mean, I think that you really have a definitive point of view, and it really shows in your photos. And I think that a lot of photographers, particularly when they're new to photography, they don't really know where they're going. You know, they might shoot a whole variety of subject matter, a whole variety of different styles, and it's really nice to see that your work has that really, you know, real cohesive nature to it.
I would say one thing there about point of view. I think, you know, it's great to have a kind of a lot of people want to have a consistent look across all of their images.
Sure. And
that's good. But I think it's okay not to do that too, right? It's okay to experiment with all kinds of different photography. And I remember when I first started, that was something that I always wondered, you know, should I have a certain style or signature?
Right.
And of course, when you first start, you're not going to, and it's healthy not to.
Sure.
It's very good to branch out, take lots of different types of styles of photography. And then, you know, eventually one may emerge, and if it emerges and that's what you're passionate about, that's when you should follow it.
Right. I mean, I think that that's incredibly good advice. I think that, look, you had somewhat of a head start because you knew that you wanted to start documenting New York City. You wanted to kind of, you know, pick off where Denson kind of prompted you to say, you know what, I want to do this. I want to be kind of, you know, the voice of my generation doing this kind of thing. And then, you know, you started just shooting not stark landscapes, but landscapes minus people or cityscapes. And then you realized, wait a second, this city is not just landscape, it's people. And you brought the two together. And that, to me, has kind of helped to define the look of your photos. You know, it just gives you that aha look. You know, like I just saw the shot of the pier with, you know, with the sunset and all the guys hanging their fishing rods off of there. I mean, it's just that makes it for me. Obviously, that same shot of the pier without the guys fishing off of it would have been good. You put the fishing guys on it, the shot becomes great, as far as I'm concerned.
Well,
and I think a lot of people might agree.
I like the idea of using people in the photo. In that case, it's not a fictitious story, but in a lot of cases,
right.
Sometimes there's an interesting juxtaposition between the people and what's in the background.
Right.
And it creates this completely alternate story that's completely different from reality.
Sure.
And I like that a lot too. You know,
right.
Sometimes it gives you a completely different impression of what actually happened. And that's always interesting also.
So what's next? What do you see yourself? I mean, do you feel that, you know, are you still kind of exploring what you're exploring? Is there projects that you think you might be working on going forward? Do you have anything in the works that you want to talk about? Are there things that you've really been thinking about maybe moving toward? Because I've, you know, followed your photography for a few years now, and I've seen an amazing evolution. And I'm excited to kind of know what might be down that pike for you as well.
Well, I would say you're never done exploring, right? You're always... Right. That's part of the fun of photography. You're always exploring, and you're always going to evolve whatever your style is or the things you like. And that's what I want to continue. But I think I haven't figured out a way to do it yet. But one of the things I'd like to really try to do is do more story type photography. Where It's not just I've done a lot of work where there's a single shot, but I want to do more storytelling with like documentary style photography. Sure. And see if I can incorporate some of the things I've done in the past with that style. Sure. And you know, that's an area where I just started, you know, maybe dipping my toes into, but it's a challenging area. It's out of my comfort zone, which is also something I like. Absolutely. And, it's something, you know, I want to try that. And then also, you know, often when I have an idea of what I want to try, usually that thing falls by the wayside, but I find something else that's just as interesting, and I follow that path. So, you know, to me, it's more, we'll see what happens, and we'll see whatever path photography leads me down. Oh, very cool. Well, Barry, it has been an immense pleasure having you on the line. I have been a huge fan from the very beginning since I discovered your work, and I continue to be a huge fan of yours. You know, I'm constantly looking at your work and feeling inspiration from it. I think that any aspiring photographer, whether they're going to be shooting with a point and shoot, whether a DSLR, whether they're aspiring to hopefully shoot with some film, could learn a tremendous amount from looking at your photos. The way you balance light, the way you balance details, the way you balance structures and people. I think that you know, maybe without even being fully aware of it, you know, there's a lot of incredibly good nuggets in there. So I'm going to encourage everybody out there to check out his site, barryyphotos.com. I'm also going to put up your Flickr link. I'll put up your Twitter link. And, you know, hopefully we'll keep this global community going, because I think that one of the most amazing things about photography is that it doesn't know any languages. It doesn't know any, you know, socioeconomic barriers. You know, it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter what your religious beliefs may be. You know, if you love photography and you love making photographs, it's the common bond that we all share. And I definitely see that in your work. Well, thank you very much. This was a blast doing this, so I really enjoyed it.
Awesome, man. Any last parting comments?
No, just like I said, I think to me, the most important thing about photography is doing something you love. And so I would say to everyone out there, just find the aspect of photography that you love to do, and go out there and just practice and experiment and fail. That's good. You should fail often, and that helps you get better.
Excellent parting words. So thank you again, Barry.
Thank you.
This has been really terrific. I'm inspired to go out and do some more shooting just from our chat right here. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. That's it for now, and we'll see you soon.